I'm so delighted to have this opportunity to bring Reverend Jaganath Carrera onto the podcast today. Reverend Jaganath, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate this.
Oh, thank you, Todd. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, thank you. I feel honored, and I have the pleasure. My first Yoga Sutras book was Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, a translation and commentary by Swami Satchidananda. And because I, in part, was really, I don't want to say confused, but I found it challenging. I didn't know how to make sense of it, in which case I found your book, which was published in 2006, called Inside the Yoga Sutras, a comprehensive source book for the study and practice of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. And I started being able to make a little more sense out of things. So, first of all, thank you for putting your energy and time. It's an incredible book. And to now be able to sit down with you here and ask you questions, I feel really lucky. So thank you.
Thank you. But I have to say that sometimes people will publish a quote from the book, and I don't recognize it at all.
You're like, I wrote that?
Yeah. Wow, this guy could really sound so erudite.
Yeah, maybe even start wondering, like, are you sure you got that from my book? Maybe you
Yeah.
maybe got the authors mixed up here.
Just the other day, there was a quote that was published, and I said, I have to take the notes about this. But I think in a certain way, as time has gone on, while a lot of the technical aspects of the teachings are still important for me to speak on, I find myself getting, in a way, simpler and maybe in a certain way more focused and maybe even deeper.
Mm,
You go through all the fluff of the sutras because a lot of them are difficult.
yeah.
Um, and then the whole idea, even behind doing the book, was not really originally my idea. Um, I would just make notes on everything wherever I was, napkins,
Mm,
envelopes, and things. And I wanted to organize it. And then somehow I must have mentioned that to someone. And then it was a matter of people asking me when my book was going to be out. I said, there is no book.
wow.
After a while, um, it seemed like a reality I had to face. And I spoke to Swami Satchidananda, and he said, it's time to update the book. The language that you have is not the same language,
Yeah.
at that point, years and years ago. Um, so that's how I got involved in doing it. I was really his inspiration. And I kept telling him that I didn't think we needed another book. His was fine. Was
That's
the fifth or sixth time he got stern with me. He says, just do the book.
uh, well, I mean, on the back of the book, the first recommendation we get is from Swami Satchidananda saying Patanjali was really with them when he wrote this book. I mean, that's a really good compliment.
Yeah, yeah. I had at that time, I just printed out and put it in a three-ring binder. It wasn't completely finished yet, but
Yeah.
I just wanted to offer it to him and say, this is what I've been doing. And he paged through it and quoted parts of the book,
Mhm.
which I found, wonderful. And then he made that quote.
Wow.
But he didn't say him. He said, Patanjali's really with you when you wrote this book.
Ah,
We felt it didn't fit
yeah.
in the
Yeah.
back, you know. Uh, but he said that, and that was nothing could have been greater for me.
Yes. I
And
hear you. Oh man, what a compliment. That's incredible.
yeah,
You know, you've had well, let's see how many years have you had officially as a yoga practitioner? Can you pinpoint the first time yoga became apparent to you?
I'll tell you the more important version. Then there's another version that might say something about me. But getting into yoga as a path and a practice in a steady way probably started in around 1973 or 1974. So it's about 50 years.
Yeah.
Um, and before that, when I was much younger, in my teens, there was a show Richard Hiddleman uh,
Mm.
doing asanas.
Heard about this. I've never seen any of the footage from it, but
So I would get in the morning. It was on a TV, and he would have two models do the asanas, and I would copy that. And what I loved is at the end he always had a meditation, and that really somehow spoke to me even more than the asanas.
mm,
For me, was a peek into something special and subtle, and at the same time something very deep and genuine about the practice. So that it was that which lasted, maybe 6 months. Then the wasteland of doing kind of things that we do when we're teens.
yeah, yeah. Did you have exposure to philosophical and or religious ideas as a child and or teenager?
I think I was brought up Roman Catholic, and when I was really young, that to me that was a reality. Um, Jesus was still accessible through prayer and through works. Um, and at a certain point, it must have been the confirmation. And I think you're 12 or 13 years old. I had a really, I think, important but disturbing experience.
Mm.
Um, we had 4 years of classes, which I didn't attend. Because my father didn't want to drive me to the church, and I was happy to just go out and play baseball with my friends.
Yes.
Uh, so anyway, right at the end, we go into the church itself, and there's a rehearsal because there's a bishop, and he's supposed to ask you questions and all. Um, and the first thing he said was the first thing we're supposed to learn is who made me? God made me. This was the one that got me in trouble. Why did God make you? God made you because he loves you. That, in the vernacular of the day, it blew my mind. I said,
Oh,
I'm sitting here and I'm looking at this giant crucifix. And I'm looking and saying, how can I love you? I don't
mm,
know you.
yeah.
And I just started
Interesting.
weeping.
Yeah.
I felt awful. I just I couldn't justify and find how can I love someone I don't know. And then I became very agnostic for a number of years
Ah,
until I saw Swami Satchidananda and said, oh, yeah, this is something that could be known. This is
wow.
something that could be experienced. And that's when I got serious. And from then on, from around 1973 or so, it's been the center of my life.
Amazing story. I love that. Do you feel like he brought this sort of connection of understanding where it felt real versus disjointed and or far removed from possibility?
Yeah, there was the love that he exuded, his incredible sense of humor. I mean, you'd go to a lecture, a 2 hour lecture, and you spend 50% of the time laughing at his jokes, but they all had like a message too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the first time I saw him in person, oh, this is to me, it's an interesting story. Before I
Mm.
saw him in person, there's a very powerful moment that I heard with him. Uh, I was painting my bedroom, and it was late at night, and everything got delayed, and it was somewhere around 9 or 10 at night. I'm painting and painting, and at that time there was a radio station, WPLJ, I think it was, played rock and roll, and I was a musician then. So I was listening to the music, and then at a certain time, this was a Sunday night, they stopped the music, and it became a talk show.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I didn't know that. But anyway, I turned on the radio. I'm painting with the roller. And what the first thing I hear is a young man's voice. This is the first words I heard from him. He said to someone, at that time I didn't know who, said, if you don't give me a reason to live tonight, I'm going to kill myself.
Wow.
And there
Wow.
was no sense of like that he was like putting it on because you could hear it in his voice. It was trembling, clearly fighting back tears. And I stopped with painting and I was sitting there holding the roller, sitting in a chair, and I couldn't turn away from this man with an Indian accent.
Uh,
It turned out to be good.
wow.
I don't remember what he said now,
Yeah.
but I was in tears. Uh,
Wow.
at the end of like 5 or 10 minutes of talking by him, this young man said, I think I have a reason to live.
Whoa.
Fortunately, he lived in Manhattan and could go to the Integral Yoga Institute there to delve into the teachings. So
Amazing.
that was a first real impression of who. And I said, "Who is this guy?"
And this is before you actually met him in person. So you
Yeah,
heard this through and you hadn't heard of him prior to this. You're just painting and listening to
yeah,
music. And here comes this yoga teacher, this spiritual master. Oh man, that's interesting.
yeah. And I go, "Who is that guy?" And then it just fell away for a few years. Then when I got back into yoga, there was a program at in New York City. I forget the name of the church. Um, And I'd been into yoga for a while, like 6 months or so, and doing asanas and meditation. Um, and I was really attracted to what I heard from him. And he gave a wonderful talk, but this is a little hard to put into words, but it's the essence of what really kept me into yoga. At the end of the program, a number of people went up to the stage where he was, and there was this. I only can think of calling it one thing, a ballet. He, people would give him often like a banana or an apple or something, and they would offer it to him. He's leaning forward, he's up high, and they're reaching up, and he would take it, and then he would immediately give it to someone else. Then another person could, and there was such an ease and flow.
Yeah.
And I saw the love they had for him, the respect they had for him. I couldn't, I couldn't turn away from it. And I came with these other people. I said, "Come on, we have to go." And I said, I can't. I had to stay. There was something in that, an offering that was accepted with such care and love. And then, of course, passed on to someone else. And I thought, this is the yogic path. You
Mm,
gain something, but you give,
mm.
right?
I
That
love it.
flow.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
that's when I got serious after that program.
That's when you really kind of knew I want to dig in on this.
Yeah.
And so I'm picking up on the fact that you recognized early that you gravitated toward the philosophy or toward the teachings, that you
Yeah.
liked the poses. That was neat. But then the meditation that was given at the, was it Hiddleman on his
Richard
show?
Little on his show, he would do a little meditation at the end of each program.
What was the transition then from this point of meeting Satchidananda? How did your practice unfold in relation to your development of your yoga practice? Did you start diving head in then into yoga philosophy and investigating different texts, or was it more that how did he end up teaching you?
I mean, there were a couple of things. I lived in New Brunswick, New Jersey, home of Rutgers University, and I was getting involved at that point, and just seeing a flyer on a tree or something said free yoga classes, Integral Yoga Club. And so I said, "This is great. I can go at once a week and for free, um, and take the class and to get into the asanas and all." I got very friendly with the teachers. There were two teachers. Both were disciples of Swami Satchidananda. Um, so they helped me, answered a lot of my questions. And that's when it started getting really more regular for me. And I had someone to the short story is one of them. Name was Nataraj. He recognized my like zeal, which is really, I was in high gear, and he said, "He says, look, anytime you have a question, anytime you could call me." I took it seriously, and I'd be reading these books.
Oh yeah.
One time I called him at 2:30 in the morning.
Oh man.
I said, "I'm sorry, but is this really? Did you mean?" He said, "Yes." He came over to my apartment.
Wow.
And I said, "I don't understand this." And it seems to, I don't remember what the questions were, but it seems like there's another teaching that contradicted it a bit. Um, so that was a big help to me to have these senior people
Yes.
um, as like guides for me. And I learned a lot from them. Uh, and really seeing Gurudev in person, it was again that how he treated people uh, made me think like I want to. everybody wants to be happy and have a meaningful life. And before getting involved with yoga on that level and with his guidance, I didn't see how you could have that. I
Mm.
could see the pain. I could see I could see happy things too. I wasn't depressed. Um, but I wanted life to have meaning. I wanted to believe in the Jesus that was on the cross,
Yes.
the spiritual being. And here was someone who had, at least for me, exuded that kind of care and that kind of love. Um, and that's really how I got involved more and more with him. Especially when his book came out. But when I got involved, there was no book. There were little pamphlets that they had at the centers.
Interesting, because there probably wasn't there was so at that time period there was no access to a Yoga Sutras of Patanjali.
There was one book called How to Know God, uh, which is not it was it's the sutra book by Christopher Isherwood, I think was and Swami Prabhavananda. Those two people
Mm.
did this book, and I read that, and that was helpful. But when I went to get it, I read about it somewhere, and there was a bookstore in New Brunswick, and I went in there and they said, "I want this book." And he said, "What kind of a book is it?" I said, "Well, it's a yoga book." And he brought me to the section of cookbooks.
Thought you said yogurt.
He thought I said yoga.
Oh my gosh.
He said,
That
"We
is
don't know where to put these books." It was so unknown in a way in
so
the
unknown. Oh my gosh, Reverend Jaganath. That's funny because that reminds me of a time where when my wife and I were opening up our yoga studio here, we were inside painting and some guy walks by and he goes, "A yogurt shop? You guys are gonna have yogurt?" And we were like, "Oh, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but it's gonna be yoga." And he just like was like, "That's not what I want." And he took off and I thought, "Oh no, we got a big hill to climb here." But that's so funny. I love hearing that story. I mean, I like the fact that you're bringing attention to the reality with which the amount of information we have access to now and with the ease with which we have access. But in that time period, it was totally different. And so I'm so curious to hear how this evolved for you. Did when Swami Satchidananda did his commentary on the Yoga Sutras, were you with him when he was doing that? What were you aware that he was writing this commentary
Yeah, I was
uh,
aware of it.
and
There was no book then. You little cassette tapes would have parts of talks that we had that, and um, yeah, the book came years later, but that
mm,
also, in a similar way, if I could backtrack for a little bit earlier on,
please,
uh, a really important feature of his teachings that I think uh, motivated me, and it started with a book from another spiritual group, which I won't name. um, and it was all about meditation and very intense, very thick, but pretty much, and I'm not exaggerating, almost every page, this author said, and this can only be achieved by, and then their brand. This can only be achieved by.
got it.
I started getting depressed.
Ah,
Like,
I
it was
yes,
so intense. And I didn't have that relationship with Gurudev
yeah,
yet, or
uh-huh,
was close.
yep.
Um, And I was asked, my wife asked me to go to Barnes and Nobles in Manhattan to buy some books she needed for class. So I thought they might have some books on yoga, and they did. And I wanted something deeply, intellectual and filled with ideas. And I went through one book after another, and they usually would have a picture of the author. None of them looked very happy. And all the way at the bottom, on the bottom shelf, I picked up this book. This is before I saw Gurudev. Um, and here's this man with the flowing orange robes, and the wind is blowing in his hair, and he's on top of a mountain, and there's clouds all around him, and he has the most amazing, happy smile. But it was a biography. I said,
uh,
"A biography," but I kept picking it up. And finally, I said, I have to get this. And I got home that night and I spent, well, I don't know how many hours from probably around supper time until the next morning reading the book because a part of it, one of the strong things was the interfaith side of the teachings.
Mm,
Truth is one, paths are many. And that really spoke to my heart too. Um,
I hear you. I hear now. Well, which book was this?
of his book, it's his biography. Apostle of Peace is what they rewrote it now. It's called Apostle of Peace.
This
And
is Satchidananda's biography.
yeah, yeah,
Amazing. So so now you have been able to read this before actually meeting him as well. You heard the radio,
yeah,
you heard the radio story. You're at the bookstore. You see the picture of him or this book from him. Oh man, that's cool. All right. I hear.
yeah. It's a nice biography because there's the biographical information interspersed with quotes from him that are pertinent. So you're getting the teaching in these nice little chunks that
Nice.
go along with it, his experiences in his life. Um,
I'll
so
definitely check it out. I do not have that one. Thank you for telling me.
yeah, it's a nice read. It's really, it's not like real technical,
Yeah.
uh, but it says a lot about how a human being can experience what we're all looking for. To have a life with meaning, a life that we perceive our life as having some value. Um, and that, as he always says, life is for fun. Uh,
Life is
it's
for
real.
fun.
We should really have joy in life, and yoga is one of the ways to attain that. So yeah, the biography is something I would recommend.
Very cool. I'll definitely read that. And I like the fact that you're pointing out that coming across a tradition that says the only way you'll achieve this is through us. That's an interesting element in yoga. Surely since then you've come across that a lot more than just that. Has that always been a deterrent for you? Has that been a little bit of a, once you come across that type of idea that my way is the fastest and the most effective way, and don't mess with anybody else's way. My way is the quickest way to liberation or enlightenment. Have you always seen that as a little bit of a trickery in this sense?
Yeah, it's still there. I think I mean, there's certainly potential for egoistic motives
Yeah.
that kind of blind you to certain realities. Um, and I think there's also the brand. People, this is a way to make money.
Mm,
Saying like, we have this one simple way to do this, and it might be a wonderful way, by the way. I'm not
yeah.
criticizing necessarily the
Understood.
techniques, um, but like I said, for me, I was surprised, and I never tended towards depression. If I was something got me off kilter, it was anger. I would get angry.
Yeah.
So, but I was reading this one book. It was about three-quarters of the way through. I was getting depressed.
Like seriously depressed. Yeah. You're like, I might be that guy calling up on the radio station next saying, if you don't give me a reason.
Yeah, I would have been primed for that. It was like,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
I think part of it is uh, maybe not a clear understanding of how important wisdom and knowledge have to be passed down from person to person,
Mhm.
uh,
Good point.
not person to videos. I mean, all those have a place and they're
Yes.
essential.
Yeah.
But at some point, there's a quote I just read. It was a Tibetan Buddhist master that wisdom is not never self-evident. It has to be revealed.
Mhm.
And just a superficial, look at it isn't going to do it. Um, it has to be revealed, and that means there has to be an interaction with someone who maybe knows a little more of whatever it is you're interested in. Um, and I think yoga and all spiritual paths uh, flourish most when it's based on an apprentice student relationship.
Do
That
yeah, I agree. I definitely see the distinction between these two methods of transmission.
Yeah,
What what medium do you currently work with? Do you do one-on-one mentorship as well as larger group teaching?
yeah, we have. I mean, we have programs where people come that don't get really close, but they come to. We have every Friday night we have a satsang, uh, different subjects and different things that we do, and guest speakers. So that could be anything, but there are a number of people, probably 30, 40 students who are initiates into our style of yoga. Um, and then there's a lot of individual things, problems come up. Um, and it's getting to the point now where some of our teachers have been 18 years with us.
Wow.
So now it's like they could see that person. Like,
Yes.
I'm really interested in passing this on. I don't want it to be all on me. Um, so now it's like, my focus is more and more like, what can I do to prepare you for when I'm no longer available? Which,
Mhm.
it could sound grisly, but it's important.
I hear you. That's cool that you're looking forward like that. I appreciate that. What was the catalyst and or time that you were transitioning from being a student to taking on the role of being a teacher?
I mean, early on with the Integra Yoga, I was asked to teach. I didn't know. When I was in grade school, you had report cards and have like, I don't know if they still do it, but there'd be a thing on like behavior.
Yes.
So every marking period, I get my uh, card, and it would always say he never talks. So quiet. So I think I was like saving it up. I didn't know that at the time. When I got into Integral Yoga, I don't know how or why it happened. I was asked more and more often to give talks. Um, then Gurudev Satchidananda asked me to be part of teacher training. So I was doing teacher training, one of the main teachers for the 10-day retreats we would have once a year. So I was getting experience that way. Um, and at one point, I don't know what year it would have been, 1987 maybe, um, he asked me to move to Virginia, Satchidananda Ashram, which I did. Left New Brunswick and went to Virginia, and I was still teaching then. Then he had me become, uh, I think it was vice president administrator. That was my title at Satchidananda Ashram. Uh, and then through a number of things that aren't particularly pertinent, it was important for me and my wife to come back to New Jersey, which he was actually fine with. He understood why, and he said, "Yeah, go and do that." Um, and I was actually going to acupuncture school.
I read that you're an acupuncturist as well.
Yeah, I haven't been practicing in a while because of the teaching, but uh, I came and did that. Um, and then it started where I would give a talk, and people started wanting to be more and more with me. And um, it started happening where people said, "Well, I see you as like a guru for me." And I said, "No." There was
Flat
this one
out.
person who was keeping track of it and said, "For 6 years, you said no. Every time you were constantly being asked, I would say no, no, no." And then I remembered what Gurudev once said to me. He said, "If someone sees something beautiful you've developed in you, don't disturb that.
Mm,
It's their vision that's causing it. They're seeing it. It's not you as the teacher in a way. It's the student's ability to see something in the teacher, like I saw in him, um, something that attracted them." Um, and so that became the beginning of Yoga Life Society. It was never my intention to do that, but they were these initial group of students really wanted to have something of their own. I'm still teaching the same thing I taught Gurudev. I'm still, an integral yoga minister, but we have yoga life ministers. Uh, and really, it's just a lineage,
yes.
fulfilling
I
lineage.
understand. I understand. Can you explain the title, your Reverend Jagannath? Where does and how does the title Reverend come in?
Uh, it's kind of my fault.
It's
It's
kind of my fault.
Of course, in integral yoga, we had sannyasis, swamis, monastics. Um, and I saw the benefit of that kind of formal commitment. Of course, the commitment, uh, more or less like the typical monk or nun, poverty, celibacy, obedience. Although it's a little bit different the way it's presented in yoga. Um, and I was very close to a number of them. I was working with them side by side for years, and I saw the power of a formal commitment in a way, like your mind know to the roots, this is serious. I'm doing this.
Yeah.
I'm not backing. I want to serve.
All
Uh,
in.
yeah, it's all in. Um, but then I started thinking, what I know all these householders that are just as connected and real about this. Um, so I wrote a letter to Swami Satchidananda at one point. I said, I know there's one step back. My mother had something inadvertently to do with this. Uh, I was telling her about Gurudev. My mother was born in Italy. She was a war bride, mail order bride. Um, and she was asking me about Gurudev, and I was feeling so tortured trying to put it in a way that she would understand and accept it. And then one point, she was thinking. She said, come follow me. She went up in the bedroom, opened up a dresser drawer, and she pulled out this information with St. Francis on it. She says, oh, it's the third order of St. Francis. You have the poor class for the women and the friars for the men, but then you have for householders the third order of St. Francis. So that was in my head. Putting it back now into integral yoga, I thought, well, maybe that would be appropriate for us as well. I
Mm.
wrote Gurudev a letter, and in those days it was all slow like that. A letter. A
Yeah, right.
couple weeks, right?
And it's
Couple weeks
stamped.
later, he
Yeah,
wrote.
I know. Thank you for reminding us because I love that time period. But I agree with you. I hear you.
It was a whole different world then. Uh, yeah, he wrote back to me and saying, well, I think this is almost his exact words. He says, "I've been thinking of this for a long time, just waiting for someone to come forward.
Mm.
Let's do it." And it was only a couple of months. He says, let's do it in July of that year. Guru Purnima, celebrating the teacher.
Yes.
Uh, Says we can have our own ministry. Um, and that's how it started. Uh,
Ah,
we weren't sure that you'd be called ministers or it'd be something else, but he, along with other people, decided let's keep it in a way that people can relate to. So it's an interfaith yoga ministry, um,
very
and
cool. I did not know that. I was so curious about that.
1980 that was.
Huh.
So that's what
That makes
20.
a lot of sense too, to have a intermediary role and maybe task to play, like you said, for the where for the householders that
Yeah,
that allows you to be a householder, but also take maybe a more formal role. Is that how you see being able to be a reverend within this yoga uh, school allows for you to be kind of like a sannyasin, kind of like a renunciate, but on the role of with for householders.
yeah,
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 that makes sense.
yeah. It's in fact the vow of the minister is based on the vow from the sannyasins, but instead of like poverty, it's like non-attachment to those things. So it's you're not making a vow of celibacy if you're a married person. Um, so it's shaped in a little different way so that the essence of what that uh, mind and life is about is the same.
Yes.
And he said they're married monks. That's how he would jokingly would say, says, "There's not that much difference between the ministers and the sannyasins." He said it's only a couple of things that are different, but essentially you're like a married monk.
Yep.
Um, and over the years, maybe a little bit surprising to me how often our ministers are called on to do memorial services, weddings, baby blessings, all those things. Um, in groups of where people are not yogis,
Mm.
uh, and uh, can speak. And this goes back to the idea of the interfaith. Um, our logo has a yantra with all the different faith symbols around it.
Yes.
And there was a time I was doing a wedding in Montreal, and uh, the couple that insisted that it be done outside. And it was in the Laurentian Mountains, outside of Montreal. And I was setting up the altar outside, and I knew that the father of the groom uh, hated the idea that I would be there. And he said he's really kind of a little bit violent guy and want to talk to him. I said, no, I'm right after, because right now I'm setting up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know.
Great. This is really getting me excited here
Yeah.
to do this ceremony. Yeah.
So I said, okay, after. And so the ceremony happens. My robe caught fire. The wind was so windy, it
Good.
blew up the tail of my robe, and it fell on the altar by a candle, and it was on fire. And the person who's assisting me is waving frantically. I was like, why is she waving like that? So she came with a bowl of water, and anyway, so so afterwards, there's like the receiving line, right? You come, people, hello, how are you? And thank you. So this one little fellow comes up, and he's all tears. He's in his 60s. He's all tears, and he said, thank you so much. He said, I hated this because I'm in business, the guy said, um, and my partner's daughter got married in the church, but the minister refused to look at her because it wasn't the same religion.
Hmm.
Like literally, he said would talk only to the male and not to the female.
Yeah, I got it.
And he saw the yantra with all the symbols,
Yep.
and he just fell in love with it. And he was a very wealthy guy. He took me to his home. Said, "Stay with me tonight. Stay with me tonight." The next morning, we're walking around outside. It's a beautiful day, and other people were walking around. He would stop everyone and says, "You should listen to what he said. It's one truth, many paths." He was just completely changed
Oh,
just by having that service.
that's so cool.
It is, yeah. Like, and of course, I'm feeling great because, like, yeah, they're getting it. You
Yeah.
know,
Yes.
one truth, many paths. You
Did
know,
when your outfit caught on fire though, did you have a moment of thinking this is not going how I had planned?
yeah. Well, yeah.
This is not looking so good. Here this guy's judging me. I'm catching on fire.
Yeah. It seemed like it was going to be exciting. It was a beautiful area, and the thing is, in this case, the bride insisted on outside.
Oh yeah.
Uh, and I said, it's pretty windy. It could be. She said, no, it has to be. It has to be. It's my dream. I said, okay. And
Uh,
things were flying. All the flower petals were all. It was just a mess. And I couldn't. The altar was behind me, and it had slits up the side. So I'm talking, and then it rose in the air and fell on the candle. And it was started burning.
oh my gosh. That
And
is
this person was with me who was a sannyasi, was like crouched down and waving furiously. And I'm thinking, why is she doing that? It never occurred to me. Then I turned my head and I see smoke and flames. And she picked up a bowl of water and threw it on my robe. And then we finished the program.
Oh my gosh, that's all. And it sounds like you've been able to do weddings and different ceremonies. I'm curious, have you supported in the role of palliative care? Have you sat with any folks that are transitioning and or ready to pass? Has that come into your sphere at all?
Yeah, there's been some of that. My wife even more so. My wife is right now she's retired, but she's a hospice nurse.
Oh wow.
So,
I have
which
so
is,
much respect for hospice. When my mom passed away and we called hospice in, I was blown away at the level
yeah,
of service that they
they're angels.
and that's where I thought maybe with you with the realm of what you do, I bet that you've come into that sphere. But that's amazing that your wife did that. And what a path of humility. I noticed that she's a reverend as well. So she took the
Yeah.
same vows that you have and you both have been able to work together. This is incredible.
Oh yeah, I've been with her 57 years.
Oh,
You
congratulations. Yeah.
know, I found the right one, and it's not going anywhere. This is it.
Wow.
Uh,
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yes. Well,
One thing about the ceremonies is a maybe a bit of evidence because it's not like lots and lots of these ceremonies, but it's fairly consistent that at a wedding or some other kind of program that you do, that to be someone who's at least suspicious of what's going on, and someone like me shows up with a robe and the hair and all that, which is just because I'm too lazy to shave. It's really the truth. I never thought I'm going to grow a beard. But anyway, so there's always like, not always, but usually there's some people that aren't very happy that you're there. But my experience is every ceremony had like a little miracle. One of the most moving was I was called by our New York center. This woman needs memorial service, needs someone to lead it. And the one who passed away was her brother. He was gay and he had AIDS. And said he loved integral yoga and asked that can we do something for him? I said, sure, we'll do it. But she said, the whole family is against you being there.
Huh.
They're
Wow.
all against you. But
Wow.
this is what he wanted. I said, fine, well, I'm happy to go and do that.
I'm up for the challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's what he wanted. So,
Yes.
it was meaningful to him.
Yes.
Uh, but I talked to her a bit because I said, I don't know this fellow. And I said, tell me about him a little bit. And the day before he passed, the two of them uh, were singing old rock and roll songs. And then soon, a couple hours later, he passed away. And that image to me was very beautiful. So when I did the service, um, I said I had to find out something. You had to say something about the person. I told them that story, and I said it's like I don't know if you know about this, but it's swan song. The phrase that people hear,
Yes.
but the story is that swans are so beautiful, but they make the most ugly sound, except when they're passing.
Oh,
They make
wow.
the most. This is the story. I don't know if it's true.
I didn't know that. Yeah. That's cool. I never thought of
Yeah.
that.
And when they're passing, it's the most beautiful sound on the planet. Could be it.
Wow. Yeah.
That's why you call it a swan song. It always happens at the end of something.
That makes
So I
sense.
said, I don't remember his name. I said, and this is what happened, and that was his swan song. And afterwards, his mother came up to me, and she put a hug on me that was like so. And other, it's always like it's not everybody. It's not like weird Hollywood where everybody suddenly is enlightened. But there's almost always one or two people that this message that we have in yoga reaches them. There's something about its purity, its power. Uh, if we live by it, I'm sure you saw that even with Margo Banda. He lives it,
Yes.
and that's what gives him that wonderful power and
Yes.
ability to change people's lives. That's yoga to me.
That is amazing, Reverend Jaganath. I really appreciate that perspective. I agree with you. Getting right down to the essence. And you kind of made mention of that in relation to your time with the teaching and the practice over so long, like when you were talking about the Yoga Sutras, that you feel like, okay, yeah, there is some maybe confusion here and difficulty, but that you're able to kind of bring it down to its essence and to its core, and which sounds to me like what you are explaining in relation to these ceremonies where, and if it's only one person, like you're, and I like the fact that you're like, hey, it's not the whole group. It's not like that everybody comes up, but if one person has that type of connection, then I feel like that's probably what's keeping you going too, right? Would you say that's one of the big sparks and fuel that's keeping you engaged in the yoga community for 50 plus years now? That's a huge inspiration to me, both you and Margot Bondu. I can't tell you how much I really just want to do it. I want to follow in both of your guys' footsteps and just keep going here. So it's encouraging to have an elder that's that's focused on this and following through and keeping it going. And when I got a chance to speak with you prior, and I've been thinking about this over the past couple of days because I thought, well, maybe I think I heard him right, and maybe I misunderstood, but maybe I did hear you right. I said something. I asked you if there was any, if you had any sights on retirement, and I think you said, as long as there's books, I'll never retire. Is that what you said?
Can't remember what I said, but yeah, I'm going to retire.
It made me think that like as long as there's food for you, fuel for you to keep digesting and like information and just this like passion for this, that there will never be such a thing as retirement. So I don't know if I got that right, but did I
The
touch upon some
essence
sort?
is right.
Yeah.
As long as there's something I can do, I'll do it.
Yeah.
That, and
Get it.
I think one of my motives in that, but we call it the Purple Book. The Purple Book, uh, um, that to try to find the language of the sutras, that a language that is more updated. Just a couple of words, not like, it won't hit you over the head, but like to make the sutra itself. I didn't want it to be just that you had to lean on the commentary, that just reading the sutra becomes a little more meaningful.
Mm,
So uh, I didn't try to keep it like word for word. Sometimes one word in Sanskrit turns out to be like three words in English because I wanted to see one thing from different angles,
yes.
um, which is really important to me. Um, that you take a word like samveganam, which is one of my favorite words. I just love the way it sounds. But usually it's translated as something like fervor. Like the results are near in yoga when you practice with fervor, which is the basic idea. Uh, but the word samveganam, it's not just fervor like in intensity. If you look at in a dictionary, um, it means like explosion. It's like there's this feeling of like thrust and power. Um, and the sutra just before that has another word, sakkara, that also gets translated as like fervor. Uh, but it's different. Satkara is not the same as Samveganam. Satkara, um, one of the meanings of it is hospitality. So now I'm looking at Patanjali saying there's two different
Yeah.
ways of looking at fervor. One is seeing the beauty of yoga and the teachings, and that is your inspiration. You're invited in, right? Hospitality. The sutras are inviting you, and then you go a couple of sutras later, and now there's explosions.
Yes.
And I think that's on purpose. I think that Patanjali has that gradation, and I don't see it anywhere else. But uh, to me, I look at the different translations, and it's not just academic. I have to feel some connection to it.
Mm.
It has some reality to me, even if it's not perfect, and it's not the only way for sure. It has to be something that I can really feel connected to, and then be able to maybe transmit a little bit of it. Um, so that's that kind of thing in doing the books.
I love thinking about the connection of hospitality and explosive thrust
Yeah,
forwardness. Yeah.
yeah,
That it would start from service and humility, and it could turn into or eventuate as this explosion, so to speak, of bliss or connection. How do you relate to it? And when we talk about words like samadhi, and if there's this idea of like an eventuation toward bliss or samadhi, what is your interpretation now after having years to mull over this and meditate on it?
yeah. I go through different periods of time where certain sutras, just like, oh, I love that sutra, and I love just spending time with it like a person. Uh, One that I think might be a backdoor way of addressing your question is there's a sutra about Prakriti, right? Material universe. And it says that Prakriti gives us knowledge so that we can become enlightened, right? It's because we get this knowledge from, it's a teacher. Liberation comes from dealing with nature. Uh, but I can't think of the word right now in Sanskrit, but the translation of it, that property is something worthwhile and beautiful. The word in Sanskrit, that's still not coming to me, but the word in Sanskrit has, as its translation, something that's worthwhile and beautiful. So now there's a tendency, at least I've found among very ardent students of yoga, to view the material universe as something you have to overcome. And I can see the way that, it's not like it's wrong, but that's the image. And I see that translation that talks about worthwhile and beautiful because it gives us experiences that lead to liberation. Uh, I see that as something gorgeous. And it reminds me of St. Francis. Mhm. This beauty of nature that's there. He was like that. He never thought that God appeared as nature. It wasn't in his philosophy, but that everything in nature was God sending a message. And it's a hopeful message, and it's a supporting message, and it's something that protects.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. That is a really great way to look at it. Reverend Jagannatha, have you explored multiple other
This
texts?
material universe.
Oh my gosh, I think what happened, Reverend Jagannatha, is we got a little glitch where the Zoom kind of glitched and I didn't see you moving and I thought, uh-oh, did I lose him? So I started talking and then you came back in, so I really apologize there.
Oh, that's fine.
I did follow you along the lines of Saint Francis of Assisi and this appreciation for nature and the way that that can produce a connection like this, as opposed to the yogi moving beyond nature or like let me try to put that aside and put myself over here in this place that but I didn't hear your final statement. Would you be able to repeat it?
No, there's a law. I can only say it once, and then that's it.
The universe didn't want me to hear it, I guess. I hear.
No, yeah, it's. I think it's the point of that to me is to not get into seeing any of nature as an obstacle or an oppositional way. That it's there, it's beautiful, we can learn from it, um, and we should learn to appreciate it because it's nature, it's the universe,
Yes.
um, and it's not to be conquered. It's so clear. And to me, the sutras, it's so clear. It gives you experiences and liberation. Experiences, liberation. It's your friend. Yeah, we have issues with it, right? The parts of nature that are difficult for us. Um, but none of it is really oppositional. Is that a word?
Yeah.
Oppositional? Yeah. Oppositional. All of it is should be seen as this incredible encyclopedia that nature is, and it's there to teach and to guide and to bring us to pure spirit. That's
Yes.
beyond nature.
Thank you for following that idea through. I did not hear you end it like that. Thank you. Do you, sometimes people will critique Yoga Sutras as being a dualistic philosophy, and maybe from, say, Tantra literature, will say our philosophy is non-dual. But from what you just said, it sounds to me like you're almost now interpreting the sutras as an element of non-dualism in in this idea of touching the ground and feeling the earth as that's one of the places we can really find liberation is through this experience of living. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, yeah, I think it does. Uh, Actually, it was interesting because I've been studying up more on this whole thing, like the Advaita Vedanta and Sankhya Yoga, which is another thing. And I think ultimately they're all valid. We're just trying to find a way of establishing a relationship
Mm.
that makes sense in reality, and like let me get involved in that relationship, whether it's non-dual or like Sankhya, where you have the two parts, and yoga, which has the third part with Ishvara, right? The God level. Um, if it gets me to understand, have an understanding, even though we know that isn't going to be exact, I want to have a relationship with the universe, with nature, with consciousness. I want to understand what is consciousness. How does that happen? I mean, the simplest thing is like,
Yeah.
how do I know that it's me? I mean,
Yeah.
I close my eyes and say, "That's me." What did I just see? What was that? I'm looking. There's nothing but dark, but I know it's me. You know, any philosophy that gets me to embrace and ponder and dance with all the aspects of creation and of self with small s and capital S both.
Yes.
That's a fine philosophy for me. Uh,
I hear ya. Yes. And interestingly enough, Reverend Jagannatha, when we started, for those of you that are listening, we're also recording this and have this on our YouTube channel. When we started, we're on you're on the East Coast, I'm on the East Coast. I'm a lot further south here in Florida. You're up in New Jersey. It's already getting dark there. Here we still have some sun. And when we started, it was a lot brighter behind you, but now you're illuminated because the
oh,
it's
look at
dark
me.
behind you and the computer screen is like shedding all this light on you. So slowly through this conversation, you've become more illuminated.
I didn't see that. Uh,
Yeah, right. Yeah,
that's the image of me, whatever the dots
right.
are.
Yeah,
So,
coming back to that question of like, who am I and what is
yeah.
consciousness? And it's becoming clear. I can see you a lot clearer now over this 1 hour. You've become much more clear to me.
Uh,
Oh
uh,
man. Well, I am so thankful, Reverend Jagannath, for this opportunity. And what I'm so excited about is I've been able to have Marga Bandhu and now you, and then our next episode is an interview with the three of us together. I get to talk to both of you together, which I'm so excited for
uh,
everybody to have a chance to hear. And again, I'm so grateful. Every morning I'm waking up and I'm writing in my gratitude journal, three things that I'm grateful for. And this morning was I get to talk to Reverend Jagannath.
uh,
So I
uh.
feel really, I've been excited all day for this and I really enjoy this opportunity. I'm grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, and may all the blessings flow to you always.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I look forward to our next session and I wish you a wonderful evening.
You too. You too. Thank you, Todd.
Thank you. Thank you.
Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.